Hello, my name is Lucas Lisitsky, and I'm a student at Osgoode Hall Law School in Ontario. And in this episode of Case Law Minutes, we're going to be taking a look at the Ontario Court of Appeal case of Whalen Byrne versus Whalen. Now, this is a family law case that pertains to the subject of cohabitation and spousal support, specifically how courts interpret interruptions in the cohabitation period when calculating the duration of spousal support that one of the spouses is entitled to. Now, quick disclaimer, this video is for informational purposes only. If you've got a legal problem, it's always a good idea to talk to a lawyer because they'll be able to give you advice that pertains to your specific circumstances. Now, Whalen Byrne and Byrne, they were an Ontario couple that began living together in 1993. For a period about 5 months from October 96 to March 97, the wife moved out of their shared home to live with her mother. Now, the reasons for this are in dispute. The wife says that it was because she was testifying in a criminal case and she didn't want to burden her family with that while that was going on, whereas the husband said that they were having a bit of relationship trouble and that was the reason she was living apart for 5 months. Now, the facts of the case seem to lean more towards the latter story, but regardless, the couple ended up reconciling in 1997. And they ended up getting married in 1999. They had one child together in 2001. And unfortunately, in 2010, they ended up separating for good. Now, the duration of cohabitation prior to their marriage is relevant in calculating their spousal support arrangements as stipulated in the Divorce Act. And the trial judge, when taking a look at this whole situation, and including that 5-month period where they weren't living together, he decided that the relationship would be calculated as having started in 1997 when they got back together after this period of separation. This would mean, according to the spousal support advisory guidelines for their particular circumstances, that she would be entitled, the wife, would be entitled to spousal support for a period ranging between 6.5 to 13 years, and the judge settled at about 11 years, so on the higher end of that range. Now, the wife, she didn't agree with the trial judge's decision. She thought that the relationship and cohabitation period should be calculated from 1993, when they first started living together, to 2010, when they finally separated for good. Under this length of about 16.5 years, the spousal support advisory guidelines for their circumstances would have entitled her to support for about 18.25 to 16.5 years. So a bit more, so you can see why the wife would be more interested in this interpretation of the cohabitation period. So she appealed the decision. And the Court of Appeal, they basically had two questions before them. The first was whether that period, that 5-month period where they were living apart, did that constitute an end to their relationship? Were they no longer in a relationship during that 5-month period? And if they were, what should the court make of this 5-month gap, this 5-month break in their cohabitation? Should it be deducted from the total number of years spent cohabiting for the purposes of calculating the duration of spousal support? Because the more years you spend cohabiting, the more years of spousal support the wife would be entitled to, at least under these circumstances. So these are the two questions before the court. Now, with respect to the first question, it'll help to look at how the trial judge saw this period of separation, this 5-month period. It was his opinion when he was looking at the situation that the relationship was basically over. It was basically ended for this period. They were pursuing relationships with other people, going on dates, and at best they were open to the possibility of getting back together and resuming cohabitation, but it wasn't their intention from the get-go to resume cohabiting after a period of a few months. It was something that just sort of happened when they reconciled later on. Now, the Court of Appeal disagreed with this interpretation of events. They give their reasons for why they believe the relationship did not end during the 5-month period on paragraph 12 of the decision, which you can read for yourself. The first reason is that this period was very short. It was only a few months. Also, that the wife did not empty out all of her possessions from the shared home. She just took a suitcase full of clothes when she went to go live with her mother. The court noted that they didn't separate or disentangle their finances or financial obligations from one another during this time. And the husband actually continued to financially support the wife during this period where they were not living together, including letting her use his credit card to make a payment on at least one occasion. Now, the wife would also regularly return to the house to spend time with their kids. These were kids from the husband's previous marriage, and she wanted to continue being involved in their lives. And even though the wife did go on a few dates with another man that wasn't the husband, the court saw that this wasn't really anything that amounted to a significant relationship of any kind. What's also notable is that during December of this period where they were not living together, the husband actually proposed to the wife in front of the kids, and the wife's answer was, "Not yet. Let's not get married just yet." Fast forward to February of the following year, and they still were not living together, but they were very much discussing the possibility of marriage. So, the court took all of these facts into account, and then they came to the conclusion that they were still in a relationship during this time. They weren't there wasn't some intention to completely separate during this 5-month period. Even if maybe there were some problems in the relationship, they still very much were in a relationship, and that the relationship should be calculated from 1993 to 2010. Now, the number that the court ended up settling on, they ended up settling on entitlement to spousal support for a duration of 14 years. If you recall, the range for a relationship of 16.5 years for this situation would have been between 8.25 and 16.5. So they gave the wife 14 years of spousal support. What was interesting, though, is that when they were making this calculation, they chose to deduct that 5-month period where they weren't living together from the total cohabitation period, meaning that the relationship would be calculated as having started in 1993, having ended in 2010, but subtract 5 months for that period of time where they weren't living together. Now, that has been the case of Whalen Byrne versus Byrne. If you want to read the case for yourself, you can find it on Canly. And if you're interested in the facts of the case, you can find them by looking at the History tab here. I've circled it in red, and reading the trial judge's decision, because that's where most of the facts that the Ontario Court of Appeal is basing its decision can be found. Now, this has been an episode of Case Law Minutes. If you're interested in more episodes of this series, be sure to check out the Litigation Help channel and subscribe. My name has been Lucas Lisitsky, and thank you for watching.